Passover season on Victory.
Hello, welcome to Victory News, Monday, April the 14th, 2025. I'm Greg Stevens, along with Mike Garofalo and Tim Fox. Fiora Hernandez is out on assignment today. Here are a few of the stories that we're watching for you right now. Global NGOs are reportedly using tax dollars to manipulate poor nations' birth rates. Journalist and communications member for the American Institute for Economic Research, Aidan Grogan, joins us to discuss USAID, abuse in impoverished nations. And the state of Maine continues to refuse to follow President Trump's ban of men in women's sports. Ahead, we'll ask Mass Exodus Movement founder and podcast host Keisha King if they can withstand the loss of federal funding. But first, let's go to Tim Fox. He has our headlines. Tim.
Thank you, Greg. Are we on the verge of a nuclear energy renaissance? Well, apparently some experts, including the United States' new energy secretary, believe so. According to the New York Post, in the last year, 25 states, including New York, have passed bills supporting advanced nuclear energy. In fact, in all, last year, more than 200 bills were proposed by state legislatures supporting advanced nuclear energy and waste-related bills. And there appears to be a battle to see which state wins. The Post report says Utah Senator Stuart Adams has bragged that he hoped to see his state become the nation's nuclear hub. As for the state of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott said recently his state is ready to be number one in advanced nuclear power. And the fact is that public opinion shifting support nuclear power doesn't hurt. A Pew Research survey from last year reportedly found that 56% of U.S. adults are in favor of expanding nuclear energy in the United States. 10 years ago, in 2014, that number was just 41%. The first round of talks wrapped up Saturday in Oman between the United States and Iran over Tehran's nuclear program. The meeting is being touted as the highest level direct talks between the two nations in more than 7 years. The White House says the top U.S. officials started negotiations to limit Iran's nuclear program, asserting that the talks were productive and constructive, and adding that they will continue next weekend. After President Trump's appearance at the UFC fight in Florida, he took questions from reporters on Air Force One.
Nothing matters until you get it done, so I don't like talking about it, but it's going okay. The Iran situation is going pretty good.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth telling Maria Bartiromo that Iran will not have nuclear weapons, and if Tehran has other ideas about it, both the U.S. and Israel will take military action.
If we can't figure this out at the negotiating table, then there are other options, to include my department, to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear bomb. We hope we never get there.
The White House thanked Oman for hosting the talks. And the world's first global carbon tax was voted on and approved on Friday by members of the International Maritime Organization. According to Breitbart News, the vote took place in London and amounts to a fee of $380 per metric of greenhouse gases emitted by ships. At a certain limit, the fee shifts down to $100 per ton. The new tax is expected to bring in upwards of $10 billion to the organization's net zero fund, which is supposed to be used for green energy transitions. The report says environmentalists claim the fee is too low, and with that being the case, shipping companies will just pay it as opposed to doing some lower greenhouse gas emissions. Mike?
Tim, the president of El Salvador is meeting right now with President Donald Trump at the White House. According to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, President Nayib Bukele and Donald Trump will discuss El Salvador's partnership using their Supermax prison for Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members. Not everyone is thrilled with Bukele's visit, including the organization Human Rights First, who say his authoritarian tactics and human rights violations stand in direct opposition, that is, to democratic values. This is the first White House visit by a Salvadorian president since 2014. The White House on Friday announced a week of wins for the president.
Inflation declined massively in March. Consumer prices dropped for the first time in 3 years. Energy prices have decreased 2.4%. Gas prices decreased 6.3%. And real average hourly earnings are growing by 1.4%.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also highlighted the administration's winning 4 major Supreme Court cases revitalizing the coal industry. The America First trade policies prompting billions in investment. The week also included a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Meanwhile, the Department of Government Efficiency attributed approximately 75% of the $382 million in unemployment claim fraud it uncovered to 3 Democrat-led states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. DOJ claimed 68% of California's total benefits went to parolees identified by federal authorities as being on the government's terror watch list or who had criminal records. The results of President Trump's Friday physical were released over the weekend, with physician to the president, Sean Barbella, releasing a statement saying this: President Trump remains in excellent health, exhibiting robust cardiac, pulmonary, neurological, and general physical function. Before that announcement and after the physical, the president told reporters on Air Force One that he was in good shape.
I think well, every test you can imagine. I was there for a long time. The yearly physical.
Trump acknowledged the medical staff gave suggestions on health improvements. Then he said this:
I wanted to be a little different than Biden. I took a cognitive test, and I don't know what to tell you other than I got every answer right.
The report was released on Sunday. Greg.
Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is urging Americans to get real IDs before the deadline arrives.
Starting May 7th, you will need a real ID to travel by air or to visit federal buildings in the United States. These IDs keep our country safe because they help prevent fraud and they enhance security.
The REAL ID Act passed Congress in 2005 was a direct result of national security vulnerabilities exposed by the September 11th attacks. So beginning May 7th, federal agencies will only accept state-issued driver's licenses and IDs that meet REAL ID requirements. Anyone without a real ID will be able to use a passport or passport card for now. The state of Maine refuses to sign a resolution Friday enforcing President Trump's ban on men playing in women's sports. Newsweek reported last week Maine's Attorney General said the state and the federal government were at an impasse while claiming nothing in Title IX prohibited so-called transgender athletes from competing in girls' and women's sports. Consequently, the Department of Education referred Maine to the Department of Justice for investigation, and the Trump administration froze the state's federal funding. But on Friday, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to immediately lift the freeze on Maine's federal funding. The ruling indicated the administration was also barred from freezing, terminating, or otherwise interfering with the state of Maine's future federal funding for alleged violations of Title IX without complying with the legally required procedure. So let's talk with the Mass Exodus Movement founder, the host of the Keisha King Show. Keisha, welcome back to Victory News.
Good to see you, Greg.
All right, here we go. Let's get into it. The battle to keep the women in women's sports and protect Title IX from being abused as a tool to force men into women's sports, it rages on. On the focus now being in the state of Maine and the courts right now. Should a judge be able to rule that the executive branch cannot only not freeze fundings of Maine over men in women's sports now, but can't do so in the future? Is that allowed?
I hate that, that this judge is ruling this way. And the statement of, there's nothing in the Title IX that says that they can't have men compete. I thought that was the purpose of Title IX, or at least one of the purposes in the first place, was that so women could have, a place to play sports. So it doesn't need to be explicitly stated. It was the purpose of the act in the first place. The second thing is it's unbelievable that a judge would even rule this way, considering we know biological facts. And so what this says to me is that this judge needs to brush up maybe on their biology. And the last thing I will say is that I hope the Department of Education will be able to do something about it. I know that they are going to get involved after this as well, considering the ruling.
You're exactly right. Follow the science. XX chromosome, XY chromosome. Listen to Dr. Simone Gold, founder of America's Frontline Doctors, give legal precedent why children or their parents cannot give permission to mutilate their son or daughter's healthy body. Here it is.
The child cannot understand what it means to have permanent, irreversible sterility. So then you say, well, okay, the parent could consent on their behalf. Absolutely not. There is no common law precedent for for one human being to consent for another human being to have a permanent mutilating effect on their body.
So who do you think's at fault here, the parents or the physicians who perform irreversible sex change procedures on children?
I think it's both. I think the parents and the physicians are at fault because many times parents are manipulated into believing that whole line of, would you rather have a dead son or an alive daughter? But where is the accountability for parents? Because we know that men are men and women are women. So they shouldn't be so easily confused. I understand you're, vulnerable and your child is going through a certain thing and you want to help them, but your common sense has to kick in at some point. And these physicians who are abandoning years of science, just biological, common sense, everything that we've known since time immemorial, they're abandoning their do no harm oaths to force this wicked agenda onto children. And so I think it's to blame on both sides.
All right, let's talk about this. Democrat state attorney in Central Florida, Monique Worrell, refused to take on 90 cases from the local sheriff in 1 week, claiming she lacks the resources. So cue the soundbite from Florida Attorney General James Othmeyer. Here it is.
We're here to help. We're going to tell her the words that no Soros prosecutor wants to hear. We're from the AG's office, and we're here to give you help. So the cavalry's here. We've got a tiger team of prosecutors that we're going to be sending to help out. We hope she will take that help. We want to get rid of that backlog, those thousands of cases, and we want to make sure that dangerous people are put behind bars.
I'll say, as you just heard, Attorney Worrell she's backed by George Soros, has been in trouble with Governor DeSantis before. Do you think she will accept the help and work on these 90 cases now?
No, I do not. We know that many on the left, they don't like to work, Greg. They don't work. They are allergic to work. So, no, I don't think she's going to do what she needs to do to handle these 90 cases. And if she can't do the job, there's other places for you to go, ma'am. Just resign and let someone come in who actually wants to help the citizens of Orlando.
All right. Keisha King is not afraid of work. To find out more about Keisha King and the Mass Exodus Movement, visit KeishaKing.com or MassExodusMovement.com. As always, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Mike.
Greg, Florida Republican Senator Ashley Moody spoke out last week about a bill she recently filed regarding student visas for students from China. It will
deny now student visas to Chinese students because China has just passed a law that now requires every national to gather intelligence, including Chinese students here studying, gather intelligence and report back. How do we not pass a law that prevents student visas in that respect? I mean, in the past few years, we've had an explosion of Chinese students that were caught gathering evidence or gathering information on military bases, on college campuses. How do we as lawmakers, policymakers not do that?
The bill is called the Stop CCP Visas Act of 2025. It appears Mexico will keep its end of a 1944 treaty and deliver water to American farmers in drought-stricken Texas. The move was announced after President Trump threatened tariffs and sanctions for only providing 30% of the U.S. 1.3 million acre-feet of water promised in that treaty. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas spoke out last month about Mexico's violation of the water treaty with the U.S. while speaking to farmers in his state.
I'm here to tell you right now, I believe with President Trump in office and the new administration, we are going to get the water. Mexico is going to comply. Ignoring the treaty will no longer be an option.
President Trump voiced his displeasure last week in a social media post that threatened tariffs and sanctions if Texas farmers did not get the water they are owed. Shortly after, President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico announced, quote, "For Texas farmers who are requesting water, there will be an immediate delivery of certain number of millions of cubic meters that can be provided according to the water available in the Rio Grande." While farmers in Texas are facing a drought, Senator Cruz described the water situation in part as man-made. Tim.
Mike, a federal judge upheld a Trump administration policy allowing U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to carry out enforcement operations at churches and other places of worship, despite lawsuits against it from faith-based organizations. Fox News reports U.S. District Judge Dabney Frederick denied a request from more than 24 groups to block the policy. They claimed it infringed on religious freedoms and caused drops in attendance. The judge wrote in her opinion, evidence suggests that congregants are staying home to avoid encountering ICE in their own neighborhoods, not because churches or synagogues are locations of elevated risk. Judge Frederick also pointed out only a few enforcement actions had taken place at or near religious sites. Greg?
Nearly 20 illegal migrants are waking up behind bars today after Immigration and Customs Enforcement launched an investigation. It found that they had stolen the identities of American citizens and were defrauding the Social Security Administration. According to ICE, 18 illegal migrant criminals are being charged with aggravated identity theft, misuse of Social Security numbers, and making false statements about being an American citizen so that they could get jobs, which is illegal. If convicted, each of the illegal migrant criminals are facing 2 to 12 years in prison. ICE made the announcement on Friday, revealing that the illegals being charged are from Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. The IRS just signed a deal with the Department of Homeland Security to help better locate illegal migrants by allowing ICE to request tax data on those they are looking to arrest and deport. According to the Immigration Reform Law Institute, in the last 4 years, there have been potentially 39 million cases where Americans have had their identities and Social Security numbers stolen by illegal migrants. President Trump on Friday authorized the U.S. military to take over jurisdiction of federal lands on the southern border in order to advance securing it. The National Security President's memorandum, written for the Secretaries of Defense, Interior, Agriculture, and Homeland Security, under the subject, quote, military mission for sealing the southern border of the United States and repelling invasions. The order designates the federal borderlands as national defense areas and directs the respective secretaries to transfer jurisdiction of them for a military installation under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense. The president's memorandum also states, quote, the southern border is under attack from a variety of threats. The complexity of the current situation requires that our military take a more direct role in securing our southern border than in the recent past. Migrants who cross the border on land under the Defense Department's jurisdiction will have trespassed on military installation and could be subjected to heightened charges. Mike.
Greg, the recently confirmed Dr. Mehmet Oz is already making waves by implementing President Donald Trump's agenda just weeks after being named the administrator for Medicare and Medicaid. Dr. Oz told state Medicaid directors on Friday that there will be no Medicaid funding for gender reassignment surgeries or hormone treatments for minors. In a statement about the letter to state Medicaid agencies, Dr. Oz wrote this: as a doctor and now CMS administrator, my top priority is protecting children and upholding the law. Medicaid dollars are not to be used for gender reassignment surgeries or hormone treatments in minors, procedures that can cause permanent, irreversible harm, including sterilization. We have a duty to ensure medical care is lawful, necessary, and truly in the best interest of patients. The letter went on to state Medicaid agencies by CMS explained how both surgery and hormone treatments lack evidence to support that they offer any long-term benefits. At least 10 states, including Kentucky, Arizona, and Texas, have introduced legislation to ban Medicaid from paying for gender surgeries or treatments for adults or minors. Republican leaders on the House and Senate Judiciary Committees launched a probe on Thursday into whether Ivy League schools colluded in raising tuition prices. The Judiciary Committee chairman of both chambers, Jim Jordan of Ohio, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, respectively, along with Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee chairman from both chambers, sent letters to 8 universities last week seeking documents and communications. The schools include Brown, Columbia, Cornell, Dartmouth, Harvard, Princeton, and the University of Pennsylvania, as well as Yale. The letter said in part the House and Senate committees are concerned that the Ivy League member institutions' coordinated practices and alleged collusion violate the Sherman Act and that the institutions continue to benefit from their prior collusion despite no longer having an antitrust exemption. Letters come as the GOP's scrutiny involving elite institutions has intensified over recent years, including accusations of liberal bias. And joining us now is a journalist and communications staff member at the American Institute for Economic Research, Aidan Grogan. Welcome to Victory News, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Aidan, everybody's talking tariffs, so why shouldn't we? Let's listen to Kevin Hassett, National Economic Council Director, tell CNN why 130 countries are now negotiating tariff rates with the Trump administration.
The whole point of the trade policy is to address the national emergency that we're too dependent on foreign products in the U.S., especially if we were at a time of conflict. And we're doing something about that. And the Reciprocal Act was basically, guys, if you come to the table and negotiate with us and treat us the same way we treat you, then we'll get your rate really low.
So, Aidan, you've written that the tariffs won't bring on the golden age of America, but don't we need at least to use them to onshore many essential manufacturing efforts in tech and pharmaceuticals, for instance, to ensure secure sources for America?
Yeah, so there are major misconceptions about the U.S. manufacturing base being gutted, hollowed out, and outsourced. We are still a major manufacturing economy. U.S. real manufacturing output continues to grow while manufacturing employment declines. And that's a consequence of productivity gains through artificial intelligence, automation, and information technology. Now, it's simultaneously important that we safeguard our vital national security interests. And free traders going all the way back to Adam Smith have acknowledged that free trade is super important. Adam Smith famously wrote in The Wealth of Nations that defense is of much more importance than opulence. So we need to safeguard our national security, but we also need to be wary of devious firms pressing for tariffs ostensibly for national security reasons when they produce items that any reasonable American would agree are not vital for U.S. national security. So while he was a senator, Marco Rubio actually argued that sugar was vital for national security. I don't think sugar is really needed for national security, but Marco Rubio was a senator from Florida, where so much of our domestic sugar manufacturing is located. So you can see that confluence between lawmakers and certain industries pressing for tariffs that will defend sectional interests rather than the common good of the American people.
Sure, very good point. Now, you wrote recently in the Daily Economy about USAID misusing tax dollars to manipulate birth rates in impoverished nations. Tell us about this abuse and why you think it is taking place.
Yes, headlines abound about USAID's funding woke progressive causes, but there's been less attention given to USAID's involvement in this web of population control organizations really since its inception in the Kennedy administration. USAID has worked closely with and funded international NGOs such as the International Planned Parenthood Federation, the Population Council, and has also worked alongside the United Nations Population Fund to push family planning, i.e. population control initiatives, particularly in developing countries out of these neo-Malthusian concerns about overpopulation, resource scarcity, and environmental degradation. And in some cases, these policies became coercive. The UNFPA backed the coercive one-child policy in China. The World Bank funded and supported the population control initiatives in India, which resulted in the mass sterilization of thousands and thousands of innocent Indians against their will. USAID has been very much intertwined and involved in this whole network of organizations, but the Trump administration is taking action against USAID, and I think that's a very positive development.
You know, liberal comedian and host Bill Maher warns that there must be a breakup between the Democrat Party and woke progressives.
I mean, a lot of people would say right now the Democratic Party is still in that mode, which is going to render them possibly an irrelevant party if they don't change.
So, Aidan, Maher's brutal reality check is this. If Democrats don't cut ties with the woke cult, they will cease to exist as a party. So is he the canary in the coal mine on this?
Well, wokeness is a kind of secular religion among the left. So they are resolutely committed to woke ideology. They seem to be really doubling down on this, even after the blowout that they faced in November. Bernie Sanders actually argued that the Democratic Party has lost touch with the working class, which was a very good point. But instead of re-strategizing, they really seem to be doubling down.
Yep. You can learn more about Aidan on X at Aidan Grogan. Great to have you with us today, Aidan. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet, Tim.
Mike, a dozen students who participated in anti-Israel protests at Stanford University in 2024 have been charged with felonies. According to an announcement from the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, the protesters were charged with breaking into Stanford University campus, barricading themselves inside, and vandalizing administrative offices. Now, Jeff Rosen is the Santa Clara District Attorney.
Free speech is American. Debate is American. If you want to convince people, use reason and logic and the power of your ideas. Don't destroy property and commit hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage.
Rosen says the perpetrators face prison time for felony vandalism and felony conspiracy to trespass. Greg?
Well, let's get the latest on Israel's war to defend itself from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The IDF has expanded operations in Gaza and has now surrounded Rafah and cut off the southernmost city and about 20% of the population from the rest of the enclave. The announcement came as the army grabbed complete control of the Morag corridor, cutting off Rafah from Khan Yunis. The city is now surrounded by forces from the 36th Division and the Gaza Division operating in the Philadelphia corridor along the Egypt-Gaza border. The Golani Brigade entered from the border in the southeast. New evacuation orders were given to Gazan civilians after 3 rockets were fired toward Israel. Defense Minister Katz called on Palestinian civilians to remove Hamas and release all of the hostages before the IDF further expands operations in the Strip. Katz said intensive IDF activity will soon expand to additional places in Gaza, and civilians would be forced to evacuate the combat zones. Millions of Israelis were forced to shelter yesterday when the Houthi rebels in Yemen fired at least 1 missile toward central Israel. The missile was intercepted outside Israeli airspace, and shrapnel fell in Judea near Hebron. Steve Leibowitz for ILTV and Victory News.
Please continue to pray for the release of the remaining hostages. That ends it all when they're released. Well, all over the world, Jewish communities and others gathered this weekend for the start of Passover. The 8-day festival began at sundown on Saturday, commemorating Jewish biblical exodus from slavery in Egypt. This year's holiday will unfold with the backdrop of the war against Hamas and anti-Semitic threats and protests worldwide. The Jewish people will celebrate with the Seder, with symbolic meals and telling stories of deliverance. Many of those meals will include empty seats, unfortunately, in honor of those killed or kidnapped in the October 7th, 2023 murderous attacks by Hamas. The Washington Times reports the Secure Community Network has issued warnings in the United States about possible threats from white supremacist groups around April the 20th, which marks the final day of Passover and Adolf Hitler's birthday. So as we go, we continue to pray for Israel. We continue to pray for America. We continue to pray for our troops worldwide and first responders. 877-281-6297, because we continue to pray about you as well. And you can call in a licensed trained prayer minister, a real person without a script. We'll just pray with you the Word of God. So 877-281-6297, 877-281-6297. Lord, we bless our audience. We thank you for the information that we've heard today, that we are active now in prayer for our nation and the things that we heard, and we're active in praising you as well. In your name we pray. Amen. Our thanks to Keisha King, Aiden Grogan, and especially you. Thanks for joining today. We're going to do this again. How about it? 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 Central, with author and Canadian attorney Spencer Morrison and conservative political commentator Lieutenant Colonel Vanessa Hicks Callaway. They'll both be here. Will you? We invite you to be. The world reports the problem. The Victory Channel brings the answer. Whatever's born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that's overcome the world, our faith. So today, please stay in faith. God bless you. And we'll look for you this evening at 5 Eastern. Bye for now.